How long have you been a DJ for at Memphis State?
I've been here about a year and a half now.
You have? And,
yeah.
But you're not a student, right?
No, I'm not a student. I'm a volunteer.
You're a volunteer. You volunteered to do this?
Yeah.
Your show's at 6 o'clock in the morning? You volunteer to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning?
6 till 10.
I mean, I know that they know you as a quote-unquote the pilot of the jazz jet. Is that right? Why do they call you that?
I was looking for a handle, a pseudonym. And I couldn't think of any name. And so I thought I'd try to think of a little concept. So I said I'd be the pilot of a jazz jet. And all the people that listen to my show regularly are frequent flyers. You listen to the jazz. If you've heard the jazz jet more than once, you're a frequent flyer on the jet.
So people who call in a lot, that's what you call them?
Yeah, frequent flyers.
You give them little bonus passes?
No, but I have had an artist to make me up a jazz jet picture with a jet taking off into the sky with a sax player, saxophone in his mouth and shades on,
Ooh.
And on the bottom of it, it says frequent flyer. I've got a guy contracted. He's going to make me some T-shirts to give away when we get our power boost.
Malvin Massey Jr. had a voice made for jazz radio. It was distinctive, unique, and one of a kind. Malvin was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. After graduating from Hamilton High School on the city's south side, he served his country in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years, then began his radio career at WCRV, a local Christian radio station. Malvin earned a bachelor's degree from Memphis State University and played saxophone in the university's jazz band. He also received his broadcast certificate from Columbia School of Broadcasting. In the mid-'70s, Memphis State started an on-campus radio station. The station developed into WUMR with a unique format. It played all jazz all the time. In 1988, Malvin became a volunteer DJ at the station with a jazz show called Images of Jazz that lasted for 30 years.
Sundays I do the Images of Jazz program.
Images of Jazz?
Yeah, I mix it up then. I play something for everybody then, mainstream, contemporary, fusion, and new age. I try to mix it up. Start off with mainstream, do about an hour of contemporary music, and then mix it up. This is the Jazz Lover, U92FM, Images of Jazz with Malvin Massey.
Quand les photos ne sont pas assez, les images de jazz sur U92FM.
Jazz is you can, the feeling that you get from listening to pop music, you can pick that up out of jazz. The feeling you get from classical music, some jazz will give you that, You can get a feel of all types of music listening to jazz, and especially to our station, because we play all kind of jazz.
If jazz had a human voice, it was Malvin Massey's. Malvin sounded like jazz. We don't know how many people were reached and affected over the many, many years that he was on the air playing music. We have no clue what that number could be. But what we do know, what we are sure of, is whatever the number was, they were all happier. They were all made to feel better.
Along with being the voice of jazz, Malvin Massey was also a promoter of jazz and jazz artists, especially musicians from his hometown, Memphis.
The hottest Memphis musician, I'd say, would be Kirk, that we play his new album, The Promise. We get a bunch of requests for that.
I, as a very needy jazz artist, local/international artist, and by the way, that's a very important distinctive, that you're on the international scene, but just so happens that you're from this place. Everybody's from somewhere. I am from Memphis, and so, Prophet is not without honor, except in one place, and that's in his or her hometown. So, as that artist, here in a jazz format, there was a doorkeeper, and his name was Malvin Massey. That doorkeeper showed me what we call radical hospitality. Right? Radical hospitality is a spiritual concept that I aspire to, that I ascribe to. Radical hospitality. It's what Jesus showed us. We couldn't earn our way into his grace. It was just just grace. And so that hospitality is what Malvin Massey showed me. There was nothing about me that deserved that open door that he gave me, the big lift, the big support, the big push. It was just grace, and it was him as a, with a vision saying that, okay, here's a guy who's from here. I can boost him and boost this station and boost this local scene all at the same time. Right. So it didn't have to happen. And people, my name is Whalum in town of Memphis. That name meant something long before I got here. But it doesn't mean anything in this context because, I'm playing alongside Gerald Albright and Sweet James and Charles Lloyd and all these other great saxophonists, other artists. So the fact that Malvin Massey in the late 80s showed me as an artist, a local/international artist, radical hospitality, and he kept doing it over and over again. He said, when you come out with something, just let me know it's on. And he was not lying. And that has been such a buttress for me in my career, that I knew that I had one place that this record was going to get played, that he would scout through that record and find just the right song to fit with his format, to fit with Memphis. And I always depended on it. And the fact that he trained up a whole bunch of folks, that sat in his chair after he was gone and would now sit there, that there's a chance that I could also find that hospitality in them because of him.
While volunteering at WUMR, the pilot met his co-pilot, Phyllis. She was also a jazz lover who happened to call the station one day looking for a particular song. The man who answered the phone told her to come by the station and he'd get her a copy. She did, and found out the man on the phone was Malvin Massey. They were married on September 9th, 1992, 9/2/92, and he spent the rest of his life with Phyllis. For the next 17 years, Malvin continued to volunteer at WUMR and became music director, program director, and in 2009, the general manager of WUMR, one of only 8 full-time all-jazz stations in the U.S. To scores of university broadcasting and journalism students, Malvin was a teacher, a mentor, and a role model. And for many adults aspiring to be radio personalities, he gave them the opportunity to learn and help them make their dreams come true.
I was a student at the University of Memphis. I think I was maybe a sophomore or junior, and one of my classmates worked at the university station, U92, and she told me they were looking for a news director, and I was a broadcast journalism major. So I went down to the basement where the station was located, and there was Malvin Massey, the program director. He interviewed me. The first thing I noticed about Malvin was definitely his smile. He has this smile that just lights up the room, and then the personality to go along with it. He was just so nice and so gracious, and he just was full of encouraging words. He told me, I know you're gonna do great at this. And so I took that opportunity to learn as much from him and the station as I possibly could. Even after I graduated, he would tell me how proud he was of me, but I was equally as proud of him. I mean, there was this station that he took to a whole nother level at the University of Memphis. We were the only jazz station in the city, and Malvin just loved jazz, and he made it great. He really made that place a great place to be, a great station to listen to, and he was dedicated. He was 100% all in.
I was allowed to have a specialty show. I was the Smooth Angel. Mondays 4 till 6, and I got to bring the very best in smooth jazz. It don't get no smoother than that. That was me. And I really, really enjoyed the show, met a lot of good people in the path of doing that show. I did it for, I think, 7 years, yeah. Malvin was just such the coolest guy. He was just a cool guy. I enjoyed working with him. Anything he had to give me feedback, it was always very constructive feedback. And he was always positive and upbeat and always had something good to say. Malvin was the godfather of jazz to me and Memphis in terms of it being getting the airplay that it needed to get and being an advocate for jazz and being a spokesperson for jazz and one of the most knowledgeable people that I know in the city as it pertains to jazz. He was just top dog at what he did. He really was. There is only the one genre, and that's jazz. And like Duke Ellington said, music is beyond category. This was these different genres, smooth jazz and all of that, are strictly marketing tools from the record labels and some of the artists and radio stations and what have you. But they, as a matter of fact, they had to think of something to categorize things strictly to make money off of it. And for BMI and those people, so they can tell who to pay for composing this music and this and that. But as far as the genre itself, it's all jazz. And it's all been in there all the time. The smooth part of it, the acid jazz part, it's all been in there the whole time.
I called University of Memphis, and another day or two, and the operator says, well, we have a radio station. I said, yeah, you do, she says. And so she rung Melvin, and I told Melvin picked the phone. You know how he be talking like that? He said something about United. He said, Malvin Massey, United too. I said, I know he ain't gonna appreciate me marketing, but he says, I told him what I was looking, what I wanted to do. I was really trying to fix it up and everything. He says, well, you want to come do a show for me? There was a pause. I said, huh? And he said, you want to do a show? I said, yeah, I want to do a show for you. And he said, well, come see me tomorrow. I said, okay. Malvin was about giving people opportunity, and I was a recipient of that opportunity. I'm ever so grateful. I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm ever so grateful because I got an opportunity to do something that I've always wanted to do. I got an opportunity to be somebody else, and I enjoyed that. And for that time, it was the best non-paying job I ever had.
So I was actually, it was my senior year at the University of Memphis, and I was looking for an internship. And my instructor at the time, who was overseeing where I would be having this internship, says, hey, you want to work at a radio station? And I was like, I had no prior experience in a radio or anything like that. And he goes, we have a station at the university. And I was like, I've heard of it, but, I didn't know if they were, having people there. And he goes, come down to the office over here. And he walked me from the music building all the way down into the office. And they're stacked with CDs, and you only see the shining head of Malvin Massey there. And he gets up, and this tall man goes, oh, hey, so you must be the new intern. You like music? You like jazz? Yeah, and it just fell from there. Oh, it was a hoot. It was like having an old friend just, pounding around. We got work done, but a lot of it was just two music lovers sharing their love of music. I think one of my favorite things was going into the studio and you're preparing for the show and you start playing some music and then you just see the shadow of Malvin just coming into the on-air room. And he goes, what are you playing? That's bad, man. That's so bad.
On the show, I went as Steve Moore, and I started with a guy called Phil Moore, Phil Webster, and we had the Jazz and Moore show. I started listening to Phil probably early 90s. And Phil was doing a Frank Sinatra show every Sunday night. It was a fabulous show. I just got to loving it. And I had picked up a number of CDs of that kind of music. And I called him and I said, hey, Phil, I love your show. You think I could come down there and help you out with that show? He goes, well, wait a minute. You got to talk to the big man. I said, who's the big man? He goes, Malvin Massey. Talk to him, see if he'll let you come down here. I'll be glad to show you. So I called Malvin and he said, can't do it. I'm like, oh, broke my heart. So the next week I called him again. He said, I tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let you work with Phil, but you gotta know what you're doing within the next 4 to 5 weeks. And I'm gonna come by there and check and make sure you know what's going on. Well, 4 or 5 weeks was all it took. Now, I was obviously nervous and didn't have the groove thing going by that time, but He came in and said, look, this is a full-time gig. Y'all are good. He was always a joy. He loved it when my daughter started working with us. He loved that a young person was in the studio and she loved Mr. Malvin and loved Phyllis. And it was just always a good time. I'm gonna miss Sunday morning, getting up, cooking breakfast, and Malvin's not on the air anymore. That's what I miss the most, because that was what Sunday morning meant to me.
It's so amazing that the Europeans subsidize their culture. We here in America, we don't subsidize our culture. When things get tight in school systems, the first thing they do is drop the music program because they have to buy band instruments and uniforms and stuff. In Europe, the government will step in and say, no, our culture is as important enough for us to use your tax money to keep it going. We don't have that here in America, so we have to depend on the listeners and the people who love jazz and like the alumni of the station to keep us going.
When I originally called the station, I was calling because I had taken a leadership class, and I was told that, okay, with your voice, let's do something with it. So I said, okay. So I asked about voiceovers and was told that, oh, that's a hard place to get into, so you may want to do something else. I didn't want to be discouraged, so I wanted to come outside of my little box. I graduated from U of M, and I said, well, let me call and see if I can do something over there. Called Malvin. So he said, okay, well, I don't have any voiceovers for you to do right now, but with your voice, why not have a spot? And I said, have a spot? He said, yeah. With that voice, you can do radio. So it was really Soulful Jazz Mondays with Toya the Voice Mason. I believe that what I'll miss most about Malvin is his encouragement. Malvin was an encourager. He could be critical, but in his criticism, he was also giving you encouragement, telling you, you may not have done this perfectly, but I need you to know that you're doing a good job and keep at it. The more you do it, the better you're going to become. But he was also one who loved to spread joy because he was so passionate about jazz.
Early 2016, I entered the studio because I had some time on my hands. I'd left my job of 30 years and had plans for, creating like a new second phase of life, right? So I had done radio before at a couple other stations in town, WLYX at what was Southwestern, now Rhodes College, and also at WEVL, 89.9 FM. And WUMR was there, and I loved radio and thought, well, I'll go see if they could use somebody else up there. And made an appointment with Malvin, 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. He was in the studio, and he came in and showed me the controls for a few minutes, and walked out and left me in there for 2 hours. And as someone else asked me, so well, was that hard? I said, no, I actually enjoyed it because I had thousands of CDs around me, jazz CDs around me to play with. So it was fun, and that was my introduction to Malvin. WUMR was a light for not only jazz, but for all Memphis music. We did play some Memphis blues, or blues section as well. We had a Memphis section. We focused on Memphis artists, Phineas Newborn, Booker Little, all the great pianists, Harold Mayburn. And so along with that, I think that elevated all of Memphis music, because WUMR was one of 8 all jazz stations 24/7 in the United States. And as a result of that, people around the world knew Malvin Massey. And he went to conventions and conferences and was on boards, and just across the world, people literally around the world knew who he was. And as a result of that, they knew about the Memphis market. They knew how important WUMR was to jazz and music in Memphis. Well, Malvin was such a great guy. He gave me a chance to share music with people when I really needed it. I'd been through a dark time after my mother had passed away. And so it was such a great opportunity to step in the studio and all of a sudden be able to sit down and love music and share music and talk to people and communicate with people. Malvin was a great communicator. You've heard that in his voice. He had a deep, rich, unmistakable voice that as a result of that, you could hear the warmth in his voice and you could hear his sincerity. And I think that's why he was such a great broadcaster, a wonderful human being, and just a fantastic proponent for jazz music.
Despite the efforts of Malvin Massey, the volunteer jazz DJs, loyal supporters of WUMR, and the local Jazz Lovers Nation, FM 92, the Jazz Lovers Station, went off the air at 6 o'clock p.m. on Monday evening, March 30th, 2020, ending nearly 4 decades of playing America's classic, original African-American art form, jazz. Melvin had retired from WUMR a few weeks prior to the station going dark, but fortunately, it was not the end of his career in jazz radio. A few years earlier, one of his childhood friends, Howard Robertson, and Larry Robinson, founder and CEO of the Kazookian Network, a podcast production company, had created a 1-hour podcast radio show called Riffin on Jazz.
The Kazookian Network presents Riffin on Jazz with your host, Howard Robertson and Malvin Massey.
Sonny Rollins.
You got to improve, man. You got Coltrane.
We were all sitting around talking on jazz is what brought Howard and Malvin together with Kazookian. Howard was already here, but Malvin had just started working with us because of what we were supplying to WUMR. But when Riffin on Jazz, when he and Howard got together and the show Riffin on Jazz was created, that was it. It was a match made in heaven, and he was part of the family from that moment on. We thought that it would be very unusual, but very natural and organic to have a show, now that we're old cats, to have a show where we sit down and we talk about jazz, and we talk about jazz like we learned it, and talk about what we learned. And that's it. And we came up with the opening, Riffin on Jazz is your weekly visit with friends, talking about the music that we love, that classic African-American art form called jazz. We were very, very proud of that. That was some wordsmithing that we both did and input on, and just very succinctly described what the show was all about.
Why? Why should I care about jazz? Why should I like jazz?
Because it's the root of everything else. It's the root of everything you got, everything you do like.
It is history.
Okay, it is steeped in either gospel or jazz.
And it is
or blues.
The first time I met Malvin was actually the first day I was introduced to Kazookian as well. I came in to meet with Larry Robinson and talk about some opportunities there. And they were actually doing an episode of Riffin on Jazz that day. And so he asked me to sit in and just check out, see what things are going. And that was the first time I met Malvin and Howard. I remember being struck by Malvin's voice. I was like, immediately, I was like, that guy has got the voice for radio. I was like, perfect for it. At that time, I didn't know until 20 minutes later in the conversation that Malvin had just spent 30, 40 years on the radio and really had become the voice of jazz. Working with Malvin was so incredible, so incredible. He was such a wonderful, kind-hearted person and so knowledgeable and smart about music, about radio and production operations. And I learned so much just from being around him and our conversations and talks. He is someone who moved me deeply as a friend inside, and I will carry a part of Malvin with me forever.
If you are a jazz aficionado, if you're the type of person that really is into jazz, how do you pick a favorite of any of them? And
how do you pick a greatest?
The greatest,
because it's an opinion thing.
Exactly, and everybody is so skillful. It takes so much skill to be a skillful jazz musician.
Let me tell you the difference.
You're at a cookout with your uncle. That's the way I would describe really our Riffin on Jazz in general. Malvin likes to crack jokes. He liked to talk about things he had seen, had done in the past, and it was a very enlightening experience when you were around Malvin. The one memory that popped into my head was we were doing a show, a Riffin, and we used to have people from around the world send messages to Facebook, and we would shout them out during the show. And so one person sent a message from, I think, France or something, and Malvin just started speaking in French. Like, just whenever we would have a name that Howard couldn't say, Malvin would say it and say it perfectly, and it was just a fun, it was a very fun experience working with him.
I'm your girl Cookie B, and
I'm Malvin Massey
with Blues in the Basement.
When it came to music, Malvin was always open to new opportunities. So when he was asked to become the co-host of another Kazukian podcast radio show, Blues in the Basement, alongside the incredible personality of Cookie B, Malvin proved once again his love for music included more than jazz. He loved the blues just as much.
Oh, I really got to know the man, the myth, the legend, my Malvin, the professor, as I called him. And all of my friends started calling him the professor. That voice, come on, you know. So, I mean, just so many fun times, just sitting, chatting, getting to really know each other and each other's families. When I met his brother, I said, I feel like I know you, because he'd always talk about his brother. And when I tell you, he was just such a professional. All the people he had met, a musician. And then we all know the jazz, we know that was his heart, but then you just wouldn't know listening to him do Blues in the Basement. So he loved all genres, everybody, and everybody loved Malvin. So I knew when I came in, I had no worries, because I knew whatever, if I was down, Malvin was gonna be up, because he was always up. So he would keep you going and making sure you knew what you were talking about, because he was a professor for real, the knowledge that he possessed. So that's kind of hard, and we had gotten together where we could just kind of play off each other, which I loved. And I could say my little corny jokes, and he'd laugh, or he'd go on saying, we're not even fooled with this foolishness, and go on to whatever we needed to be talking about. So that's what I'm gonna miss, but I thank him. I thank him for everything that he has taught me, and I'm gonna try to make him proud.
We are talking about the blues in the basement.
Talking about the blues, baby.
In late 2020, Malvin was diagnosed with cancer and began a lengthy treatment program that kept him out of the studio for several months. Now, I'd worked with Malvin at WUMR and had known him for over 25 years. So I agreed to sit in with Howard, who I've also known for a few decades, and be a guest co-host on Riffin on Jazz. When Malvin came back to the show, I continued working with Kazukian in video production and sitting in on Riffin on Jazz when Malvin was unavailable. Well, one day, Larry, Howard, and Malvin had a meeting, and I was asked to become a regular co-host on the show. It was an invitation that I quickly accepted. Malvin actually gave me my first spot on live radio in 2017. And that man taught me more about jazz and jazz radio than I ever expected. So being on a show with Malvin Massey was really a dream come true for me. You know what I liked about Malvin was his respect for the musical art form called jazz. Playing music is an art. It takes training, practice, and a passion if you really want to get good at it. Well, Malvin recognized that in jazz and respected the art and the people who played and created the music. It's a characteristic you don't find much in today's music. People create music just to be popular and make money. Malvin didn't care about being popular. He just enjoyed playing good music, and I'm going to really miss him for that. In 2022, when Malvin was unable to continue doing the Riffin on Jazz show, recording artist Deborah Sweeney, another Memphis native and jazz lover, was asked to become the third member of the team. She too was a friend of Malvin's and recalls the many things he helped her accomplish in her career.
When I first contacted Malvin about the release of my CD, Malvin was so receptive, and he was looking forward to playing my project, which really made me feel good. My song, Bossa Nova Casanova, that's on the CD, stayed on the chart for 19 weeks. and with the support of Malvin and his crew, and it just really made me feel warm to know that he and the people loved the song and the album so much. When I first came up with that idea, pop-up Sunset Jazz at Court Square, and I approached Malvin and explained to him what my idea was about having a monthly concert series downtown at Court Square, he thought it was a great idea. And he let me know right off the bat that he was in full support. I just miss Malvin from knowing he's not around. I'm so glad to really be a part of Riffin on Jazz. So thank you. I want to thank Malvin. Rest in peace. We miss you and we love you and we'll never forget you because Malvin was jazz.
On October 29th, 2022, the pilot, Malvin Massey, took his final flight and laid the jazz jet to rest. For well over 30 years with his loving wife by his side, he lived his life doing what he was put here to do, what he loved to do, and what he enjoyed doing, playing that classic African-American art form called jazz.